Hello and welcome to Oh the Horror, where we all go a little mad sometimes. I'm Jack Ellis,
And I'm Matt Ellis.
and today we will be reviewing the 1981 slasher movie Graduation Day. It did take a while to figure out a theme for this episode, and I thought, hey, since I'm graduating high school this year, or I already did at the time of recording, that this would be apropos, I guess. This film is a drop in the bucket of what I refer to as the post-Halloween era of slashers, where production companies would just churn out different themed slasher movies because of how cheap and how lucrative Halloween was. Do you want a Valentine's Day themed slasher movie, a New Year's themed one, freaking, what have you? One of the most popular series at this time was Friday the 13th, and those movies have little to nothing to do with the actual superstitions associated with the holiday. So I suppose it is rather fitting that there is a Graduation Day one, since these movies do focus a lot on youth. And I suppose that's a pretty long-winded introduction, so I'll just go and get into the movie. It starts with a high school track team at a school called Midvale High. And the school year is coming to an end, and Laura Ramstad is shown winning a race at the meet easily. As everyone is rooting for Midvale High and cheering, Laura suddenly drops dead right on the track from a blood clot. We then see what is going on a couple months later when graduation is only days away. On the opening, how about you go first, since I might have a bit more to say about it?
Okay, well, just to clarify, it was a track meet.
Yeah.
And it was something like, it was the 100-yard dash, something like that, and, she won it easily, but somehow at the end she just got a blood clot and died. They never really say what specific caused it. Everybody, of course, has their own theory, but yeah, it's definitely something. I mean, that kind of thing happening in real life is very unlikely, but not impossible. Like, that kind of thing has happened before, so it was definitely an unexpected and, I would say, creative opening.
Yeah, I probably don't feel that way. For one thing, the editing is a goddamn fever dream in this scene. Like, I could just not overcome the feeling of what the fuck is going on. Like, I was on the track team for a year in middle school, and I still couldn't understand anything that was happening until the race. And, yeah, it is shown that she's, like, sort of pushing herself, but, like, a 17-year-old dying of a blood clot is a bit out there, and there also is a bigger problem with a lot of the movies of this era. A lot of movies like this are obviously inspired by things like Halloween and Black Christmas, but what made those great is how little we actually knew about the villains and their motivations. But all these movies seek to copy the sort of long-winded backstory and whodunit aspects, which, I mean, are fine. They can work in theory, but I just like my killers with some sort of mystery to them, and we don't know why they're doing what they're doing. But that might just be a matter of personal taste. And then sometime later, Laura's older sister Anne comes to visit her family from Guam, where she is stationed because she's in the U.S. Navy. She hitches a ride from a trucker to get to her mom's house from the airport. The guy flirts with her, and she subdues him. After giving him 2 warnings by choking him, with his own bandana and grabbing his balls while he's still driving, he eventually drops her off at the house. She went inside to see her mother, who has a warm and caring, unlike Anne's stepdad, Ronnie, who for some reason is cruel and vindictive toward Anna and tells her to go back where she came from. On this part, I guess I'll go first now. I do like this scene because it sort of has a small town vibe to it. There is a common trend in movies, especially horror movies, where for some reason truckers will always be portrayed as like rude brutes. And I don't want to imagine the unenviable job of people who have to drive nonstop for days on end. I mean, these people sometimes turn to abusing amphetamines just to stay awake. And
Mm.
every single movie portrays them as just slobs. And so I'm not blaming graduation day as the sole cause of this, but I'm just saying it's something I've noticed in movies, and I don't really know how I feel about it. And as far as uh, you know, as far as her parents go, the scenes where she's coming into the house, you can see that the mom is nice, but like sort of on edge, like she's trying to hold everything together, and it's not said, but it could be implied that she maybe started hitting the bottle since her daughter died, judging by how the two parents behave. And her father is just an outright asshole from his first scene to his last scene. Even at the it comes up at the end how much of just a dickhead he is. But yeah, that's my opinions on the opening. I think it's all right.
I think it's all right too, and I agree with what you said about truckers being portrayed as like brutes a lot. Like, do you remember the second babysitter movie
Oh yeah, I do.
where that one guy they had that one guy, he was like this woodsman. They didn't really say he was a trucker per se, but like he actually tried to sexually assault a teenager.
Yeah,
And
I do remember that. And that guy was played by the guy who played Big John in Halloween Kills, I think. If I'm not mistaken, y'all can correct me in the comments. But yeah, that's just a trend that I noticed. But anyway, while all of this is happening, one of the other track athletes, Paula, is murdered while jogging in the forest by this movie's mysterious slasher villain. And it goes to the school where she watches their graduation rehearsal and even meets up with his boyfriend, Kevin, who agrees to meet her after school. Before that, she goes to a room where woodshop is being taught by Coach George Michaels. I don't know why. I'll get to that after. Who Anna knows was Laura's coach when she died. And the two get into an argument because Anne believes that the pressure Coach Michaels put on her partially caused her death. During this altercation, Michaels informs Anne that he lost his job because of that situation. He is later seen cleaning out his desk and has a pair of gloves and a stopwatch in there to suggest he is the killer because Paula's killer was keeping track of the time that it took to kill her on their stopwatch. Um, so on the scene, I think the first kill is decent. It's shot kind of cheaply, but that's sort of to be expected in this era of horror movies. And um, I'm all for a movie having its own story, but like all these interweaving, dynamics because of Laura's death just sort of gets in the way that this is just sort of a cheeseball slasher movie. I mean, it sort of is like Cocaine Bear or something, where we talked about like the movie knows exactly what it is and we know exactly what it is, but for some reason wants to be so much more than that, and it just comes across as off, at least to me. But yeah, for all that I say about this plotline, I think the actors do a fine job at portraying the sort of grief and pointing of fingers when something like this happens. And yeah, the sort of whodunit aspects of the killer, uh, it's fine. But that's really all I have to say on this section.
yeah, and I can understand a lot of finger pointing going on because of just how you know nonsensible Laura's no wait, Laura was the older sister.
Anne's the older sister.
Okay, right. How unexplainable Laura's death is. It's like she dies at the age of like, what, 17 or 18 from
Yeah.
a blood clot, like at the end of a race, the subjectivity behind her death. Does she even really die in a car crash or drowning or something like that? It kind of leaves it leaves things open for people to blame each other, which I imagine only adds on to the pain of her family.
Yeah.
Because they don't know, they don't even have the closure of knowing what happened.
Yeah. And so after this, Anne goes over to Kevin's house to give him the necklace Laura owned that all the track and field athletes at the school. While this is happening, Sally is getting ready for a photo shoot in the locker room when the lights go off and she gets jumped by it. But it turns out to be a couple of her classmates. This keeps Sally from being able to concentrate when she is doing her gymnastics routine for the shoot. When she goes back to the locker room, a person grabs a fencing sword and a mask and stabs Sally with it. Here, I'll let you go first to talk about this section.
Well, we kind of notice at this point that the pattern is the track team.
Yeah.
So apparently this is about a killer who decides to try to kill the people in the school who can run the fastest.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Like, he decides to, of all groups of people, he decides to go after the most athletic ones.
Yeah.
That's my take.
Yeah, and this scene to me is kind of bewildering because, like, she's literally changing. Like, she's indecent in this locker room. And there are these two girls that just kind of walk in on her doing that. And they just, like, when she gets upset about it, they treat her like she's insane. And it's just like, what the hell is going on in the school?
Mm-hmm.
But,
especially when there was recently a murder.
Yeah.
So it's like...
Yeah, and... I mean... I do like the fencing sword aspect of it is, again, like, this whole scene is just kind of silly to me, because not only is the way it's shot just sort of weird, but, like, why is he a fencer? I mean, if it's about a track team, or it's about graduation day, then, like, why not have the killer be centered around that? Like, more of the other kills are centered around the track team, but for some reason the motif is sort of being in a fencing costume with a fencing sword. But that's, I really don't have much more to say about that. So, Ralph, track runner, who is also on the football team, bumps into Doris and Joanna while hiking, and they play keep away with his football in a joking manner before tossing it behind the shrub. When Ralph gets there, the killer is waiting for him and with his sword going all the way through him. When Ralph tells him to get the ball back, the killer throws the sword with the ball attached to it at Ralph, killing him. There is a graduation celebration that very night. The band Felony makes a guest appearance to play some music for the dance, and everyone else is just seen walking and roller skating. That's except for Dolores and her boyfriend, Tony, who sneak off to the woods to have sex. However, when Tony gets up to urinate, his head is cut clean off. Dolores comes over to see what happened. After a few minutes of being chased by the killer, she trips and the killer gets her. So, like, yeah, this scene, the scene's fine. It's just like, I'm trying to think of this movie through the lens of a low-budget filmmaker, which is something that I am. And, like, there are scenes where it's obvious that it's the daytime, and it just cuts in between day and night. That was just really confusing to me, because I couldn't tell if it was, like, starting to be morning, or it was still light out, kind of, or it was night. And also, like, between this and Rob Zombie 2, why do you think a high schooler would stop dead in the middle of sex to go take a piss? Like, I don't think that would be very, I don't think that would stop them, but...
He probably just wanted to make sure he didn't put the wrong fluid in her.
For the love of God, man. Jesus Christ.
Oh, come on, that's funny.
It's funny, but it's just like, okay. Yeah, so... Where are we? Okay,
Do you need a minute to
yeah,
collect
yeah,
yourself?
yeah. So yeah, you go ahead and give your 2 cents on this section.
Well, I mean, I didn't really, you know, all the kills in this, I have to say, were pretty cheesy. Like, I know this was made a long time ago, but still, it just, but so was Halloween. The kills in those were really not. Like, the camera shots, you could easily tell were being done to make it look real, and could the acting just wasn't great in these scenes. It just, I
Yeah,
mean, I guess I actors nowadays tend to be able to do a lot better with these kinds of scenes, but it's probably because at the time slashers were still pretty new and people, you know, haven't had much experience seeing them before and knowing how to act, and that probably is why they weren't really able to do that well.
yeah, and that's what I try to say a lot is like, if the movie is low budget, think of all the other movies from that era. First Halloween, First Texas Chainsaw, Black Christmas. All of those were made for peanuts, and they did incredibly well. And I think it's just a lot of these movies were really rushed because there's a factor of like striking when the iron was hot because of how successful Halloween was. And I think a lot of these movies use a lot of cheap actors, probably more than likely porn actors. But um, I think it's just really I don't I don't think this movie's terrible. Like it's not egregious to me, but it's just like I feel like the concept could have been executed better than it was.
Right? I mean, it's not
Yeah,
a bad,
yeah,
but it's got its problems.
yeah. Like when I watch like something like Halloween Resurrection, like that shit makes my blood boil because of how just cheap and lazy it all feels. But this feels like people who were trying to make a good movie, but just sort of came up short. If that makes
Yeah.
any sense. And okay. As these killings have piled up, Principal Guglione is bombarded with phone calls from parents wondering where their kids are. Inspector Halliday goes to Guglione's office to question him about the disappearances. He goes to Coach Michael's office as well. During this investigation, another murder happens when track athlete Pete practices pole vaulting while alone on the field. He gets impaled by steel spikes put where the pad should be. Um, this scene is actually not. It's not a bad kill because it factors in the movie's actual themes, and the effects are done really well, and it is a very creative kill. So this one might be my favorite in the movie. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah, that's really all I have to say about this section.
I actually like this game. Well,
Yeah,
it's like a Saw level
yeah,
creative.
yeah. And so Doris and Joanne are then seen in the locker room, but then find Sally's corpse in the locker when they notice blood coming out of it. Coach Michael hears their screams and gets there shortly before Kevin gets there and thinks Coach Michael is the murderer. The two fight for a minute before Michaels runs away, and Halliday soon gets to Kevin and Anne to see a photo inside Sally's locker of the track team with an X over everyone's face, except Kevin's. As Anne and Halliday race to find Michael, he is actually found by Kevin, and Michael's finds Ralph's body. When these two face off, Kevin admits he killed everyone because he feels like they are all responsible for Lauren's death. After those two do some more fighting, Michaels then gets Ethan's knife but is shot by Faraday because he thinks Michaels is the killer. This scene, like I said a second ago, this movie itself is not egregious to me, but this scene is for one reason. I thought it would go in a direction that not a lot of slasher movies went in the first place, or around this era. I thought what would happen was, uh, Kevin would do this whole big monologue, and then we'd get to the point where he was, where George or Michaels is found with a knife. Why is he named George Michael? Like, was George Michael famous at this point? Like this is like have you seen Arrested Development?
No.
There's a kid on there literally named George Michael, and they always talk about how similar his name is. Um, but uh, I thought it would be Michael's getting shot, and then Michael's ends up going down for all the murders, and Kevin gets away scot free. And I thought that would actually be a kind of scary road to go down, because shit like that does actually happen in real life. But I I'm fine with how the movie ended. I just think that would have been a more interesting way to go. But how do you feel?
I didn't think that it was too bad. I'm glad that there was, the idea behind the killings made sense. Ethan was her boyfriend. He really envisioned a future between them, and so he just wanted to blame everyone when she passed. So, that works in my opinion.
Yeah, like they were even talking about how they wanted to get married like the day after graduation.
Yeah.
And yeah, so as it seems like Kevin is going to get away with it, and visits Kevin at the house, I believe there's a scene where she's talking with the vice principal or the secretary, and like he says that Kevin came to pick up his diploma and Anne's trophy beforehand, because, and I think that's supposed to mean that he knew the graduation would get canceled because he was behind all the killings.
Hmm.
But yeah, when he visits her, she goes upstairs and looks for him, but finds Laura's corpse in the room. Kevin shows up and explains he wanted to keep Laura near him, and then tries to kill Anne to avoid anything coming between them. Anne is able to throw him through the window, and Laura's corpse as well. When she sees that he is still alive, he runs to the school track, or she runs to the school track field and hides under the bleachers. She finds the remains of Kevin's victims in a shed here too. When Kevin gets there and shoves Kevin onto the spike he killed Pete with, and were still pierced through him. When Anne is able to go home, she is sleeping and wakes up to what looks like an undead Kevin, but is really just Ronald, uh, who is drunk. In the morning, she heads back to the airport in a taxi, and she rides under the same banner on graduation day. So, for this ending, I do like the idea that he dug up Anne and, like, kept her, which is just a fucking terrifying prospect to me.
That is some
Yeah.
real gangster shit right there.
Yeah, and, the kill itself with Kevin is actually not bad. It's not often in slasher movies that the villain gets killed with one of the things they use to kill someone with, like their wall decorations, or like the scene in movies where it'll display all the victims and the final girl will run through all that. It's an interesting idea to have that be what kills him, and I I kind of anticipated that the scene at the end would just be a dream, like the end of I Know What You Did Last Summer or what have you. Um, and yeah, I think for the most part it is a pretty good ending. So, what are your thoughts?
I like the ending too, and I did like the kill as well. It. I was kind of surprised to see that Peter still had the spikes in him. Like you would think that. I mean, I guess I didn't know how he had them placed on the ground, but you would think usually that they usually take the weapon out of the spikes.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's just my own thoughts.
Yeah. So, as far as this movie goes, um, it is just very middle of the road to me. It um, it's not bad, but it's not really good either. It's just sort of it's very much a product of its time. And yeah, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I thought this movie, there really wasn't much special about it. It was a good movie, but, it was just,
Yeah. So on that note, I will give this movie probably a solid 5 out of 10.
I'll give it a 5 too.
Alright, well, anyway, this has been. I am Jack Ellis,
And I'm Matt Ellis.
and this has been Oh the Horror. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening.